Hello and welcome back to Business Matters at the Hindu with me, K. Bharat Kumar. Last week, the central government asked all fertilizer marketers to change the branding on all their products that went out for sale. The new norms mandate that 2/3 of the branding space has to be dedicated to a homogenous Bharat brand, as also the scheme under which fertilizer subsidies have been made possible. The remaining 1/3 of the space can be used by these firms to include the branding that they want to display. Why has this come about? Why does the government want to do this? The move has brought about questions regarding free market, innovation, quality differences that spur competition, and so forth. You're probably wondering, why am I talking about fertilizers and subsidies and so on? Is it at all important? It sure is. This sector touches our lives daily whenever we have food. But the reason you won't hear too much from this sector is because it's largely controlled by the government in terms of end product pricing and some parts of distribution and so on. For the year ended March 2022, fertilizer sales in India touched about 600 lakh metric tons. Out of these, about 436 lakh metric tons were locally produced and about 225 came from imports. Indicates a significant dependence on imports. As an aside, it's important to note here that Russia, Ukraine and Belarus together account generally for about 40% of global exports of fertilizers. It's a no-brainer that the war has impacted commodity prices, and all the raw materials that go into making of fertilizers make fertilizer prices costlier. Of all the fertilizer that is used in India, 50% is accounted for by urea. The remaining is taken up by the NPK category, or nitrates, phosphatic and potassic. The retail price of urea is fixed by the government, and it costs about, say, a 50 kg bag of urea for a farmer costs about 268 rupees. It's interesting to note how much of this is actually subsidized by the government. So here's where we take a look. Mr. Hardik Shah, Associate Director at CARE Ratings, a ratings agency, says that a ton of urea costs about 35,000 rupees to make, whereas the market price is about 5,000 a ton. So 85% of the cost of urea is subsidized by the government. For the non-urea category, depending on the mix of ingredients, the government suggests an indicative price and offers a fixed subsidy to manufacturers. For the year ended March 2022, the fertilizer subsidy for the government came to about 1.5 lakh crore. This fiscal year, ending March 2023, is expected to touch 2.25 lakh crore. Mr. Shah of CARE Ratings says that he had estimated that it would be higher, but because of lower input costs, like for example natural gas, which is an important component in the making of fertilizers, international prices of natural gas have come down, and this helps temper expectations on a spike in production costs. Last month, a parliamentary panel pulled up the Department of Fertilizers and the Finance Ministries on the planning front. It had indicated that the budgeted estimate for FY22 was about 84,000 crore for the subsidy bill, but the revised estimate pegged it at about 1.5 lakh crore. Again, for this fiscal year FY23, the budgeted estimate is about 1.09 lakh crore, whereas the requirement that was projected was 1.76 lakh crore. And as we all know, we discussed earlier in this discussion, that the final bill may actually come to about 2.25 lakh crore. This is quite some variance from what we budget for and finally what we end up spending. Mr. Shah also refers to a pile-up that has been happening for the past 4 or 5 years and which has been cleared out as of now. What does a pile-up mean in this context? Here's how it works. The country budgets for a certain subsidy expenditure for fertilizers at the beginning of a year. Year goes from April to March. And assuming because of high demand, the subsidy gets exhausted by December. But there are still 3 more months to go, January to March, for the year to end. After the year is over, the dues from the government are indicated as receivables in the manufacturer's books. And this kept getting added on for about 4 or 5 years. And as of last year, May 2021, the government allocated about 60,000 crore and has cleared out those dues. Mr. Shah points out that as of August 30, 2022, only the July month subsidies are due to the manufacturers. Your next obvious question is, why can't we procure raw materials for fertilizers locally? Why depend on imports that keep getting costlier and also result in the outgo of forex? But in reality, a significant change is unlikely because fertilizer production requires methane, which is derived from natural gas, and we have to import much of the natural gas that we need as a country. If green hydrogen becomes prevalent and a reality, then we can avoid the use of methane and just electrolyze water to derive the hydrogen needed for production. But only now have electrolyzer plants begun to be announced by the industry. We still have some ways to go there. So let's come to the crux of the matter. Why has the government come out with a branding diktat now? One point of view is that with such a large subsidy bill, the government likely wanted to let farmers know directly how much its own role has been in keeping prices low. But as has been pointed out in the media, this could be done by way of DBT, or direct benefit transfers, directly to the farmers' bank accounts. It's a far more direct way of letting farmers know how much exactly subsidies help keep prices low. Interestingly, an FAQ by the Fertilizer department on its website tells us a DBT, or a direct benefit transfer to farmers, is not administratively feasible. Here's why. It says that in order to be able to send the subsidy directly to farmers, it would have to make a transaction every time a product is purchased. And then the extent of subsidy would vary depending on the quantity of the product purchased and the type of product. So it becomes an administrative headache. Right now, the subsidy is given on sale of fertilizer to the farmer, but the subsidy goes directly to the manufacturer. In this context, it is also important to note that the government partly subsidizes even transportation costs for fertilizers. So other observers wonder if the branding move is intended to bring down those transportation costs. Especially in the case of urea, it does not matter which manufacturer the farmer buys the product from. They are the same across manufacturers. So if a farmer in West Bengal wants urea manufactured in Maharashtra of a certain brand, it does not make sense for that urea to travel all the way across the country. But the flip side to that is that transportation costs are not really that high when you look at the context of the total fertilizer subsidy. Transportation subsidy comes to about 6,000 crore in that region. When you look at the total subsidy that we have for fertilizers, which could touch 2.25 lakh crore this year. CARE ratings also points out that it is not really common for fertilizer manufactured in a particular region to travel really far out and reach another region for sale. How has the industry reacted to the branding move? Analysts don't seem too worried. Mr. Shah of CARE ratings indicates that at least in the case of urea, which is common across manufacturers, there is literally no difference. So he does not see profit margins of companies being impacted. However, the industry is worried. The senior official in the industry indicates 3 areas where the impact can be felt. The first is in the accounting for products from across different manufacturers at the dealers at the point of sale. Because accounting by dealers typically happens by sight, the branding, the logo, the color, the insignia for different manufacturers. Eventually, they will have to get it right, the dealers, but the first few weeks it's going to be an effort for them to account for these accurately. The second area of impact could be in the quality of the bags that help package these fertilizers. The official points out that farmers typically tend to reuse these bags after they exhaust the fertilizers. So it's a branding opportunity for every use that this bag is put to. That incentive will be lost. The third is in product innovation itself. Logically, when a manufacturer says he's making a fantastic product and he has the opportunity to brand it in the packaging and there is lesser and lesser space for him to do it, then that incentive is lost to make sure that he communicates why his product is better than competition. So it does look like this story will evolve as we go forward. Let's see how the farming community takes to this, what impact it has on fertilizer producers and so on. We will keep you posted. Thank you for being with us and have a lovely week ahead.